Hello, everyone. ESBR Boxing. We are back. Myself and Paul Kelly. You're used to us now. A weekly feature, and we're here again. We return for another preview week. We've got three fights coming up, two locations. Newcastle, which, if it's anything like the weather is currently, is going to be bloody freezing, and then we move straight over to the Emirates for in Dubai for another contest. But we're going to start. Paul, I'm going to come to you and ask you how you're doing. And then, please, if you're willing and you're well, to take us through the first fight, please, that's occurring in Newcastle.
Yeah, thanks, Elliot. I'm all good. Thanks. Another kind of jam-packed weekend of boxing here. I'd say maybe not as high profile as some of the ones we've done recently, but still a lot of boxing both in the UK and, as you said, around the world, which we're going to dive into. So without further ado, I may as well get us started. And yeah, as you said, we're heading to Newcastle for the Zone show on Saturday, the 18th of March, headlined by Cyrus Pattinson against Chris Jenkins. Now, a quick tale of the tape, as we always do. Cyrus Pattinson's 5-0 with three KOs. He's a 28-year-old southpaw fighter, and he's 5'9". Obviously, Chris Jenkins doesn't really need any introduction. Well-known name in UK boxing circles. He's 23, 6 and 3. He's only 8 KOs. He's 34 years old now. Orthodox fighter, also 5'9", and obviously he was a former British title holder at welterweight. This fight's for the WBA International welterweight title. And suppose a couple of questions for you, Elliot. There seems to be a bit of hype around Cyrus Pattinson, despite only having 5 fights. Um, is he? Do you think this is maybe a little too much too soon for him, considering Chris Jenkins is so seasoned, and has won the British title? Everyone knows who he is. It's kind of a huge fight at this stage of his career for Pattinson. Do you think he's kind of biting off more than he can chew here?
Yeah, thank you very much, Paul, for that, for taking us through that and teletype and eloquently as always. I think, to me, yeah, I saw that when you mentioned this fight, I thought, yeah, obviously there's a bit of buzz around Cyrus Pattinson, but I mean, 5-0 going against Chris Jenkins' record, and obviously the guys that you mentioned, like say, former title holder, guy who's kind of, I mean, you went the distance with Tyrone McKenna, like you say, went 8 rounds with Eko Usman. I mean, Marku stopped him obviously in 4, but Marku, we know what Marku's boxing style is like. Even victories over like Johnny Garton, for example, going, it's just I'm looking at this thinking Cyrus Pattinson's not been in with anyone you can even compare to some of those names, even though Jenkins has lost those names. Yeah, I don't. To be honest, I don't. Years old, obviously the fresher man. To be honest with you, I don't know. When I first looked at it, I thought Jenkins' points as I was kind of looking at it. But then I'm also, obviously if Cyrus Pattinson is as the hype would suggest, a future potential, like you say, like British European title holder as well, at least, then yeah, he should be coming through this. But it just seems odd match, which seems very early to make this sort of contest for Cyrus Pattinson. So I'm actually, in my mind, kind of more leaning towards Chris Jenkins, but given, like you said, a hyper around Pattinson, maybe that pushes it towards like 60-40 or even a 55-45, because it seems old that this fight's been made. But I still can get a points victory here, to my mind, anyway.
Yeah, interesting, very interesting. For one, I was at Chris Jenkins' last fight against Tyrone McKenna in Belfast, and Chris Jenkins beat Tyrone McKenna. I like Tyrone McKenna, and as you know, a Belfast boxing fan. Um, I'm not, with no bias. Obviously, I think Chris Jenkins beat Tyrone McKenna, and I think that although there is a bit of hype about Pattinson, for one, I actually expect Chris Jenkins to win this. I still think he's got a good bit left. I don't think he's done by any stretch of the imagination. The last fight against McKenna, he was brilliant. He forced the pace and stuff, and I think if he forces Pattinson into a pace that he doesn't want to fight at, he could win this fight on points, as you say. But we'll come back to another fight in Newcastle, um, as our third fight that we're going to preview. But secondly, Elliot, I'm going to throw it back to you between the battle of the juice heads, I would like to call it. Fight going down in the UAE between two heavyweights.
No, this is a gorgeous fight, Paul. Now, this people have been talking about Juice Heads. Not saying he's guilty, but with the Conor Ben thing, people have been saying Conor and Manny, maybe that could be a potential, couple of guys that a suspect in that way. But this is two guys that are openly suspect in that way. And I think let them both go at it, frankly, Paul. Let them both juice and let's go on it. So we're on Jarrell Miller, you're exactly right, versus Lucas Browne, taking place, sorry, on Saturday night in Dubai. A quick tale of the tape. I mean, obviously, like both men don't really need much introduction, but I'll give it to you anyway. So Jarrell Miller undefeated, 25-0-1 record. Lucas Browne with a record of 31-3. Lucas Browne is currently 43 years old compared to Jarrell Miller's 34. So obviously a lot of miles on the clock for Lucas Browne in comparison age-wise. Height, not too much in it. 6'5", Lucas Browne versus 6'4" for Miller. Reach 78, 77, so not too much in it. Both orthodox fun of, I suppose, unpick their records a little bit. I think obviously Jarrell Miller is a guy who would have been known for fighting AJ if his urine wasn't sort of fluorescent and radioactive around the fan fight week. But he's come in since then, since that sort of ban that he was doing with a couple of victories against Bracamonte, Cardenas. A guy who's also got a victory over Thomas Adamek, so fairly another victory over Marius Watch. So guys, he's kind of been in with guys who are those sort of gatekeeper guys that you kind of see on heavyweights records and sort of come through those tests. Lucas Browne, well, to go through his previous opponents before some of the losses. Obviously, he beat Shagayev for the WBA World Heavyweight title. But then obviously lost to Dillian White, lost very surprisingly to some to Dave Allen when Dave Allen was on his rise to heavyweight glory. But I say, Paul, and I say this to you now, which may be something when we come to predictions. I think a surprising result for Lucas Browne was actually his last fight when he stopped Junior Farr in the first round, which I don't think anyone was necessarily expecting, given the sort of miles on Lucas Browne's clock, and some of the contests he's been in. Paul, you alluded to it previously. I think, well, I say alluded to it. You stated it fairly explicitly. Both these men have had issues with drugs in the past. There's a big age disparity. Jarrell Miller, to some degree, obviously is a big man, big heavyweight, not the most ripped when he stands on the scales, but passes the test necessary to this stage. Do you think for Jarrell Miller this would be another victory, another kind of, I suppose, a marquee name? And do you, if so, do you expect the stoppage? Is a man with 21 KOs from 25 fights. How do you see this fight playing out? That's
It's an interesting one.
Question. Secondly, do you think Lucas Browne history?
I mean, Jarrell Miller. I mean, Jarrell Miller is obviously you mentioned some of the wins he had there, and he was doing really. He was kind of rising up the heavyweight rankings, for his pop test. Lucas Browne has had I think Lucas Browne's had a weird career because it's not like it correlates. It's not like his last, he's lost 3 of his last 5. It's like his losses have come at different times, all by stoppage, but against different level opponents. Then he comes back, as you said, and beat Junior Fa. So that makes me think that Lucas Browne's on the juice again. So I think Jarrell Miller will win. Do you know what? You know what I would love? I would love these two to fight. Just both openly take PEDs and just fight and see who wins. Both openly. I would love that. But yeah, Big Baby against Big Daddy. I don't really know who to favour. I probably will go with Jarrell Miller, to be honest with you. I think just the fresher man. And I do think you can maybe see a stoppage in the mid rounds if Lucas Browne's, all 3 of his defeats have come by stoppage. It's just whoever has more of an enhanced performance on the night, I suppose, will win the.
Let me ask you, because obviously, I think Miller will win as well. But do you think? Just a quick word on before we go to our third and last fight. Do you think Jerome Miller will ever be accepted back in the kind of mainstream heavyweight kind of contest? Do you think we'll ever see him fight one of the more established names? Would you reckon because he, like you said, was so enhanced that he's almost been banished now, or do you reckon he could be rehabilitated in some way?
I don't really see him fighting for a heavyweight title or anything anytime soon. Anyway, I mean, but then again, you never know. So if the belts seem to fragment a little bit, he might get a title shot, but I don't expect him to win it. I don't think he's a top level heavyweight. Because at the time when he was looking good, you would have fully expected AJ to smash him, even though Miller was undefeated. But he was winning. He had an insane gas tank, which is obviously due to the drugs. But no, I don't really see him getting a world title shot. In my opinion, I don't think any governing body would really want to give him one either. as well as promoters, but just because of like he was. I know I've taken the piss a little bit, but he was legitimately a walking pharmacy. I don't know how many different drugs, different drugs were in his system, but yeah, I hope he doesn't get a world title shot either anytime soon.
No, thank you, Paul. I think, I think when I think of Jerome Miller being cut, I think of that scene in Limitless where he licks the blood at the end and he gets that kind of like that drug just re-enters and reanimates him. But Paul, thank you very much for that. We're going to go back to you now. We're going to go back to Newcastle. You mentioned title shots there. This is for also for a title. It's for the British, well, for the English heavyweight title. So heavyweight action again. Paul, please, will you take us through it?
Yeah, of course, Elliot. It's obviously we're talking again on the undercard of the Newcastle card. Solomon Darcy's is fighting Robert Isme in a battle for the English heavyweight title, as you said. It's undefeated against undefeated. Quick tail of the tape. Darcy's 5-0, Orthodox fighter, 29 years old, 6'5". He's from the West Midlands. And then you go to Robert Isme, who's the local fighter here. I think he's from Newcastle. He's an Orthodox fighter, 6 years older at 35, and he's actually 11-0 with 4 stoppages. So, as I said, both undefeated fighters. However, I think for Robert Ismay, he's not really fought anyone of note at all. A very padded record. Whereas you look at Solomon Darcy's, and although he's 5-0, yes, he only has 1 stoppage. But look at the people he's beaten. He's beaten Sokolovsky, obviously, who a lot of people know, and it's a good test for a young up and coming heavyweight. Bracamonte, Espindola as well. So there's 3 names in 5 fights that you recognise. So he has some decent wins, won them all on points. Decent fights to be winning at the beginning of your career. So my question for you is, obviously on paper this is undefeated against undefeated, but in reality, do you see Darcy's as a big favourite here? Do you think he'll win the fight? And if so, is it a KO or is it a points job here?
No, I do thank you again for that, Paul. Yeah, I totally agree with everything you're saying there, to be perfectly honest. I think the fact that we've heard of Solomon Dake was just simply because he's been in bigger fights. Obviously, he's fight Sokolovsky, who obviously is a gatekeeper of sorts, and probably would have been a heavyweight world champion himself if he was allowed to train properly. But I think we've got yeah, I agree with you. I think he'll have too much, frankly. Solomon Dake is, I think, like also younger, fresher. There seems to be more momentum with him as well, doesn't there? More kind of investment from a promotional perspective. I think probably points, frankly, if I had to put money on it. Like you said, 1 KO in 5. Ismail's not been stopped, home fighter, 10 rounds, get to the end of that. So I would go Dakers on points, yeah.
Yeah, fair enough. I think I'll maybe throw a bit of a spanner in the works and say I don't disagree with you. I think Darcy's will win. I'm going to go for the stoppage victory just because it's a longer fight. Um, Ismay's never been that far. Obviously, Darcy's hasn't as well, but I think Darcy's can maybe get him to him in the second half. I think it is pretty one-sided, to be honest with you. I hope I'm wrong. I hope it's a good fight. But then we say again, it looks one-sided on paper, but how often the English, Southern area, even British title fights throw up unbelievable scraps. So you never know. Fingers crossed we get another one of them. But yeah, that's I suppose all we've got for this week. If you want to wrap up, Elliot.
I certainly will. So yeah, guys, obviously, thank you very much for watching this content, for reaching this far. A 10 rounder, I suppose, short and sweet this week. Paul, I'd say thank you to you, but also I'd say, guys who are watching, obviously we've got other content coming up on the channel, don't we? As usual, we've got interviews, reviews, deep dives, looks at other fights, other events as well. So check those out. Let us know in the comments whether you think we're talking rubbish, whether you think we're talking sense, and we'll get back to you probably. We'll interrogate each other that way. But yeah, thank you very much for your time, Paul. Thank you very much, you guys, for watching. And as you know, if we're a weekly fixture, we'll see you again next week.
Yeah, as I said, see you again next week. Thanks, everyone.